public lectures as well as talks to professional bodies, he was for a long time the face of mental health in Kenya and in the region. Following the 1998 terrorist attack in Nairobi, he led the Operation Recovery team that assisted the survivors and their families. Over the years, Dr. Njenga has led the campaign against the stigma of mental health, using, among other methods, the mass media. His TV series, which is dubbed Frankie Speaking, broke the silence over mental health issues and led Kenyans to embrace the message that mental illness is common and treatable. Dr. Frank is an author of a number of books and textbooks of psychiatry, numerous scientific papers, as well as a long-running weekly column in the Business Daily. In public life, he served as the chairman of NACADA and was the founder chairman of AAPAP. He is also the chairman of AAR Group of Companies. Dr. Frank is married to Elfrida, and they have 3 children and 1 granddaughter. He is also a member of the All Saints Cathedral. Let me also quickly remind you of who Dr. Nancy Njenga is. Dr. Nancy Njenga holds a Doctor of Psychology degree in clinical psychology and a Master's of Arts degree in counseling psychology from USIU Africa. She is a certified life coach. She has 16 years worth of experience in psychotherapy on clinical stroke mental issues such as depression, anxiety issues, distressing life issues such as terminal illnesses, loss, and grief, and addiction, to mention just a few. Without giving all the details, she is married to Patrick Njenga, and they are blessed with 3 children between the ages of 24 and 11, and they are members as well of the All Saints Cathedral. Now, to get us starting, I'm going to ask Dr. Nancy Njenga to give us a quick recap on what we covered last Wednesday before I bring in Dr. Frank Njenga.
Good morning, everyone. Once again, thank you, Provost, and we thank God for this opportunity to come again and share with our congregants and Kenya about this special place we have found ourselves in, the social isolation. And I'm delighted to have my senior in the field, Dr. Frank Njenga, who is going to even help us more delve into this topic of the impact of the social isolation. Just quickly going back to what we shared last week, I think we were able to unpack what social isolation is, the distancing, and how it is impacting all of us. And we were able to see that it has removed us from our social, our normal life situations of going to work and having a routine, socializing, going for weddings and burials, and being able to meet for parties and chamas, go to the gym, and even looking at some of our people even facing loss of jobs or even less income because the businesses are not working. And we said that the major impact is other psychological, emotional issues like anxiety, depression is also on the rise. We have had reports of violence in the families now that people are staying longer together. And we said people are able to cope with their issues because of being able to go to work, go talk to their friends, go talk and go to church as well. And all those avenues that people are using to cope have been removed because of the social distancing and the social isolation, which is the only way we are being told by our doctors and the government that we need to do to prevent the spread of COVID-19, besides the sanitizing, the masks, and washing of hands. We're also able to look at some of the issues people are facing, such as social anxiety. And we unpacked normal anxiety and unhealthy anxiety. And we talked about normal anxiety being able to help us get up and wash our hands, get up and observe the social distancing. We also talked about being able to cope positively, not cope negatively. And we mentioned a few negative coping mechanisms like drinking that would exacerbate issues like depression and anxiety. And also we talked about positive coping mechanisms like exercising, eating healthy, playing games at home with our children, having a routine and a structure, that we are not the whole day in our pajamas, that we wake up and take a shower and do some things at home so that then our lives have a sense of normalcy. And then from that, we also talked about the vulnerable populations. We looked at the people who need to be taken care of, the sick, the elderly, the children as well. And we mentioned something little about the men. The men not to continue what we called a bit of toxic masculinity. I think that's the word we're trying to use, where they still want to feel culturally they need to be out there. To work and be out there, because in our culture, men don't go home together with the children and the mothers. So we requested that they obey what the government is telling us. And we did a bit of self-care, how to cope, how to accept the emotions, how to be able to observe our children and see what is happening to them and be able to help them cope with what is going on. And today I'm excited as we go deeper into the conversations we are having in our minds, the thought processes that we are having and how to change them so that we can be able to adjust. That we have Dr. Njenga, who is a psychiatrist, and will be able to even get deeper into the medical area and help us understand what is happening in the medical field and also with issues of mental illness, and even in a more scientific way unpack this COVID-19 for us and the impact it has for us. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nancy, for a very good recap of what we covered last Wednesday. Now, Dr. Frank, welcome to the show. This is a weekly talk show from the Cathedral, just responding to the need of the people now, but also this will be happening also in future as we get to the new normal. Now, the coronavirus pandemic is not just a medical phenomenon. It has both the mental and the behavioral effects on human beings. As a psychiatrist, could you help us understand what is the effect of coronavirus pandemic on the humanity?
This for me is a first. I have done many interviews in my life for television. This is the first one I'm doing using a mask. And it feels so funny to be hiding away from people. It's really most peculiar, which brings me to the important point of the fact that I am normal. You're normal. Nancy is normal. The viewers there are normal. What is abnormal is not us. It is this invisible enemy that we have before us called the virus. I think it's critically important for all of us to understand that seemingly a small point, that we are all reacting in different ways to the abnormal environment in which we find ourselves in. So I was looking at something earlier this morning about the most basic things that we as human beings do, which is to sleep. And there are increasing reports that more and more human beings are reporting the presence of disturbances of sleep. And some of these disturbances of sleep actually are very scary and very worrying, because more and more people are reporting very vivid nightmares, by way of example. You know, animals chasing them, of things, flying doodles, you know, flying all around them and chasing them and seeming to come to eat them away and that sort of thing. The science around nightmares, and I'm just giving an example here, is that they tend to occur more frequently during times and periods of transition. And it doesn't have to be a bad transition. It can be a good transition. You know, recently married. It could be moved to a new city, you move to a new house, and so on. So the presence of disturbing nightmares, if anybody is experiencing that, can be attributed to the fact of our new normal, which is totally abnormal in every respect. The second thing that contributes to the challenges of sleeping at night is, and I think Nancy touched on this one, is treating this whole abnormal situation like it's holiday time. You get up in the morning, you don't even brush your teeth, you just stay in your pajamas all day, you have a nap in the morning, you have a nap for lunch, you have a nap for tea, and the whole life routine is disturbed. I'll get very personal. I was very happy to see you, Provost, wearing a tie and, you know, and seeming that you're here to work. It's important that we all capture the routine of giving the day structure and a semblance of normalcy. We will fight this abnormal situation by ourselves remaining normal. Get up early in the morning, do your regular exercise, do your prayers, do everything else that you need to do, and so on. With your permission, I have one other thing to say, which is this thing has been so all-consuming of us that it feels like the COVID-19 has been with us for 16 years. In fact, it's about 3 or 4 months. And so what we know from a scientific perspective, specifically about COVID-19, is very little, because very few scientific studies could have been carried out in the very short period of time that this virus has been around with us. However, that said, there are a couple of studies that have come mainly from China, because again, you know, China was the first area to be affected. And there are 1 or 2 studies that are coming up recently from the US, specifically on the mental health impact of COVID-19. So the first studies, interesting ones, were perhaps not surprisingly on how COVID-19 affects frontline workers, the doctors, the nurses, and other people who care for people who have this virus. And there is no doubt, and this is published data, scientific data, that frontline workers, doctors, nurses, and so on, have demonstrated very high levels of anxiety and depression, including what I've just talked about, difficulties and challenges in sleeping. So the science around depression and anxiety in frontline workers is very clear. Then also in China, there are 1 or 2 studies that looked at a slightly different side of this COVID thing, which is groups of medical students, and to see how they were coping. And that was a sizable study, and it looked at what aspect of these students helped them to cope with the challenges and anxieties arising from this. And from that, it was gained clear, and I'm sure you'll be happy to hear that people with social connectivity, people who have families and that have strong bonds, people who have financial security, people who have invested well in social capital, did much better, are much more resilient than people who have hovio social links. I've said many things. Now you can ask me questions.
There are 2 things that you've said that I'd like us to get deeper into. Number 1 is the frontline medical teams. You can imagine the stigma that goes with it when one member of the family is a doctor and they have to come home. How do you treat them? Do you treat them as a father, as a wife, as a husband? And how do you make them acceptable into the family? And the second thing that you've said, I'm going to bring up after this, is the whole question of the behavioral patterns with medical people and the students. And what can we do to help them, because these are people whom we think, as medical doctors and students, they have solution to the problems. And that's why I said at the beginning, it's not just a medical issue. It has a mental and behavioral factor.
Okay, I'll answer the first question because I remember it. The second one I'm likely to forget, so remind me when I'm done with this one. And it's a whole question of stigma and stigmatization. And I don't know how many people remember the earlier days of HIV/AIDS in this country.
Sure.
One of the biggest battles the medical workers had to fight in those earlier days was the whole question of stigma. One of the biggest problems we have in the practice of mental health in general over the years, again, is stigma. Now, what drives stigma in general, and then we'll come to what is driving stigma in the whole field of COVID-19. Central to stigma is ignorance and lack of knowledge and fear. And the most effective tool of battling stigma is knowledge and information and clarity about what this whole thing about. We battled HIV/AIDS by giving people accurate information of what causes it, how is it transmitted, how can you prevent, and so on and so forth. We have had some very successful programs, the Royal College of Psychiatrists in particular, and the World Psychiatric Association as well, on anti-stigma campaigns, particularly around depression. And the lessons from there are the same, that the more people have accurate information about medical conditions, the more likely they are to treat it respectfully and without stigmatizing it. My suspicion with COVID-19 is that we have learned, all of us, very quickly. And I have to say this, I shouldn't, I don't advocate for government, they don't employ me to do that. But on this one case, my personal view is that our government is doing a sterling job. It was very quick off the block in the interventions that it has put in place, closing schools, universities, restricting gatherings and so on. Now, this appears like oppressive actions, but ironically, and Mutahi Kagwe has done very well on this one, this is precisely what I'm talking about, dealing with the stigmatization. What government is telling us, what society is being told is that this thing is here with us, this thing is dangerous, these things will kill you. However, you're not helpless. You can wash your hands, you can sanitize, you can keep your distance, you can... In other words, much as it looks like all the things that we're being told are negative, they're actually empowering us. And by following them, we're dealing a blow on the stigmatization. When people feel helpless and hopeless and incapable, then they stigmatize things and they expose ignorance. So the fact that I can wear this mask in an interview such as this one, the fact that this mic was sanitized before it was given to me is a sign that there is a deep understanding of what the issues are. Oh yes, I've remembered the question. You asked me about health workers.
Yes, health workers.
Oh, good point.
Stigma.
Okay, yes, good. So now let's come to that health worker who has attended a person who has COVID-19. Again, it's natural that the families and the neighbors would be afraid. Let's not even use hard words, like stigma. Let us just say that if a nurse or a doctor gets home to his wife and children, or her husband, or whatever, then the thought, I wonder if this person might be infected. Did they use that personal protective equipment exactly the way? What if our children get this thing? What if our grandmother? So it's normal.
Sure.
We have had, as the Kenya Medical Association, very detailed conversations on where doctors, nurses, and other frontline workers should reside? Should they stay in a hostel that is in a place that is determined so that they don't keep infecting their, potentially anyway, their families? Or do they stay normal lives and stay with their families? I think on this one the jury is out, because this thing is going to last for a long time, which is the bad news. And you can't have frontline medical workers, doctors and nurses, and other frontline workers being separated from their families. So we go back. The jury is out. There is no clear answer as to how to deal with frontline workers with respect to their families. But also, the fact that we are empowered by knowledge and information is a good thing and positive for us.
Well done. You said that those people who have been more resilient, who have come out of the COVID-19 challenges, have had family and social support. Could you say more?
I'm happy to do that. Very, very happy to do that. That one I know something about. The science around resilience is actually very well grounded. And quite a bit of it is old. Some of it is fairly recent. Let's start with relatively recent stuff. There's not much science around resilience specifically with COVID-19, but there is quite a bit of science around SARS and the way it spread and the way quite a number of studies from Singapore and Hong Kong, where the effects were very severe, looked at populations of patients who suffered from SARS. And what they did was to look at people who had actually been hospitalized and had recovered and so on and so forth. And what was very clear was that there were a certain number of groups of people that, that could be identified. Bottom line is that pro-social factors, factors that show one as being one who is grounded in the community and in the society, are the very factors that give one resilience and who makes an individual capable of bouncing back into a normal life post-COVID days. So as far as disease is concerned, sadly, we have very solid data on the utility and usefulness of family contact, financial stability, spiritual grounding. All that is very clear. We have other information, science. There's a lot of science also about recovery post other instances of human disruption. For example, following the South Asia tsunami, there's a huge body of evidence that shows the same thing, social connectedness. The 9/11 attack in New York, again, the people who survived and did well and didn't abuse alcohol and didn't develop severe PTSD and didn't develop severe depression were precisely the people who had evidence of social grounding. So resilience is a factor. In fact, let me say this, then I'll be completely quiet if you allow me. The lessons we're learning from here, and the lesson I'd like anybody who's watching to see this take home, is that investment in social capital, investment in social connectedness, which includes connectedness with your church, with your family, with your old chamas, and is what will protect you in future in the event of a social disruption of any kind, whether it's a tsunami, whether it's an earthquake, whether it's a bomb blast, whether it's COVID-19. The science around there is very simple and very clear. So now I'm quiet.
No, I'm still going to engage you.
Okay.
But members, if you'd like to ask any question to both Dr. Frank and Dr. Njenga, feel free to get in touch with us. You can either write an email to info@allsaintscathedral.org. You can also get in touch with us through Facebook and Twitter handle. You can get in touch with us through any social media, and my team will be able to pass the questions to me, and we can engage with the doctors more. One of the biggest things that I have heard today is the investment in social capital. And I know in an economy like ours, we overemphasize on the money investment, which is important. But what Dr. Njenga is saying, and resonates very well with Dr. Nancy, is the place of family in terms of resilience and coming out of the pandemic. One of the symptoms of any adjustment is issues to do with depression and suicide. I don't know, as a psychiatrist, are you getting more calls and cases of depression and suicide?
I'm sure Donald, this guy called Trump, has friends. I don't know them, and I think there are very few. But you must give him some credit. One of the few things that I think he's gotten right recently is the whole clarion call around the very steep increase in severe cases of depression, in suicide rates, and in alcoholism and other conditions. In fact, were it not for the fact of his way of saying things, I think actually on this one thing, Trump has a point. His argument is that this lockdown, if it continues the way it is continuing, the economic and financial consequences of the lockdown are going to be so severe that we might have more people dying of mental health consequences than would have been killed by COVID-19. I think there's a slight exaggeration, but I think on this one there is a point. I think the point at which we open up the economy and allow people to go back to normal life has to be balanced between the dangers posed by the virus and the mental health consequences. Now, let me explain this point, because I think part of the reason you invited us here is so that we can give the viewer some science.
Sure.
The science around the economy, poverty, and so on, and depression in particular, is solid as a rock. There is absolutely no doubt that people who are in poverty, and surprisingly, people who enter into poverty for the first time have more serious risks of suicide than people who have not entered into poverty. And this is critically important, because when bankers and economists and other agents of management of the economy do the things that they do so well, they very rarely consider the relationship between their actions and suicide. In fact, studies from India, from the United Kingdom, much less so here, confirm that poverty and suicide live, the science is so solid. What is interesting around that, and there are many things, and we can talk about this one subject only for another day, is that it's not so much that I am poor, it is so much that I am poor in relation to yourself. It's relative poverty. When I perceive you to be doing, let me give you an example. If you live on, say, $1 a day or $2 a day and you're completely poor, at that level, there are families that are able to afford mafuta ya taa, okay? And there is another family that is poorer that cannot afford mafuta ya taa. The suicide rate, and this is the funny thing, are seen to be higher. I'm giving examples, so yeah. So the ability to buy or not to buy mafuta ya taa becomes the distinguishing factor. One last thing here is that the economic consequences of, and I think the World Bank, that warned us on this one 2 or 3 days ago. The number of people that will go into new states of poverty is humongous. And another report actually for the World Food Program yesterday, indicate that the people who will go into new hunger situations, people who will be starving, will double at the end of the... So these are real things, and these are real conversations that I think ought to take place between those of us in mental health and those of us who are superintending over the opening or not opening of the economy. Yeah, that's where we are.
Yes, as a doctor, would you help us to know what are the mitigating actions that are required today? We already have the science.
Yeah.
And we know that poverty is related to issues of depression and suicide.
Yes.
What is it that the society can do today? What can the church do today?
Yeah.
What is the government able to do today to help the mitigation of the effects of the pandemic?
Again, I can say this with exceptional confidence. I have no idea. I have no idea. And that will perhaps come as a surprise. Anybody who tells you that they know what to do post-COVID-19 is talking nonsense. Complete, incurable nonsense. The reason for that is that I don't know what happened at the time of Adam and Eve, but after that, since Adam and Eve, the world has not seen anything close to what we're experiencing today. Maybe Noah's Ark had similar concepts. Seriously, I mean, I've been trying to think about any event global that has caused the kind of effects and ramifications that COVID-19 is having on us. There is nothing. Take that from me. I have looked and I have researched and I have thought. There is nothing. You see, what happens generally is that if you look back, for example, in 1347, there's something called the Black Death that lasted 5 or 6 years. This is the big plague. Again, funny enough, it also started in China, went through Middle East, what is called the Silk Route, went through Italy, found its way to Spain, to UK. It didn't cross the Atlantic. So to that extent, it was a bit small. If you look at the Spanish flu of 1918, it went and affected the whole of Europe. So we as Africans could look at them and say, ha ha ha, hiyo ni shauri yenu, and so on. So every serious man-made or natural disaster has been limited geographically. This is the only thing that has affected the entire world. So what are the economic consequences? What are the social impact? What are the... All those things have no answers. However, having provided that caveat, there are 1 or 2 lessons that are general that we know about the way human beings react or don't react. And these, as I said earlier, there are big studies post-tsunami, post-earthquakes, post-floodings, and so on, that show that support from government, social support, social connectedness are all factors that promote resilience. Working together between experts, scientists, and government and so on is the only way we are going to handle this thing. And finally, every jurisdiction will have to develop its own homegrown strategy to support the people. That, in my view, must include a program for mental health support.
Thank you. As I engage Dr. Njenga further, continue to bring in your questions and comments. You can get to our counseling line and prayer line, which is 0701 009553, 0701009553. I'm about to open up to questions, but let me ask you to comment further on two things. Kenyans are very interesting people. They are ingenious in every way, and we've seen it on social media. You lock them in Nairobi, they will find their way out, whichever means they can use. That's one way of Kenyans behaving. But there's another one that I've seen, and this morning, somebody sent me a text. This is somebody well-educated. So talking of poverty, this is not somebody who is poor. This is somebody very senior. I will not mention the profession, but it's one of the best studies courses that you can do in the University of Nairobi. But he sends me a text that we should not wear masks because the masks that we have received from China have some chemicals that is meant to kill Africans by the Chinese. I didn't answer, but maybe I will answer later. But I was about to say, one, I don't expect that from you. Number two, anything that you send that is not based on facts, you shouldn't. And it's a whole question of spiritualizing of problems. And that's why for us pastors, most of us, it's very difficult to do things differently. We think the church can only gather. And we have a lot of spiritualizing of this entire problem. Is it part of our mental problem as a nation?
I sent you, the Provost, privately, the World Psychiatric Association position paper on mental health and spirituality. When you read it, it's very, 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 very clear. And it's very clear that there is a relationship, a very clear relationship between spirituality and mental well-being. There's no doubt about that. The World Psychiatric Association is very clear that all psychiatrists at the very least and mental health workers in general must be respectful of the spiritual practices of all the people that they look after. Not only because human beings must respect each other, but because of the deeper and new understanding that spirituality is a pro-social factor that is promotive of resilience, full stop. So that said, the World Psychiatric Association recognizes a number of categories of a relationship between spirituality and mental health. The first and most important one, and I'm confident most of the viewers are in that category, are those people who have what is called a normal relationship with spirituality and the practice of religion. Simple, all right? And that is the majority of people. They are comfortable, they are rational, and there is no stress. There is no sense of estrangement between themselves and the practice of spirituality. The second category is a category in which mental illness is expressed through spirituality. The kind of story that you're telling us now, stories of demon, of this sort or another coming from China to finish the people of Africa because they are black and so on. We've seen this kind of uninformed, particularly with respect to family planning. We've seen it recently with the effort by government to reduce the incidence of cervical cancer and so on. Just people who, in fact, even in other jurisdictions, we have seen the same kind of thinking around measles vaccinations, which is, and so on. So there are groups of people who are constitutionally paranoid and prosecute this kind of. And the last group are people for whom the practice of their religion practices is the very evidence of a mental illness. And I see them on TV, I see them in the streets, I see them and they go around curing imaginary diseases in imaginary people. So those are the categories that we generally recognize, and we have a very formal position. So what are we going to do with this expert that they talk about? We have to live with him. He's our brother or he's our sister. We have to educate him and tell him that, you know what, let me say one thing, because I can see the time is getting finished. The thing about this COVID thing is that it's not yours or mine. It belongs to all of us together and equally.
Sure.
We have seen Prime Minister Boris Johnson. We have seen this, the son of Queen Elizabeth. We have seen everybody is affected in this. And the reason I am encouraging you to protect yourself is because by doing all the things that we are being told to do, you and your family will stay safe and well, and mine as well. So the story of one being his brother's keeper cannot be truer than today, because I have to keep my brother safe for me to be safe.
Sure.
I've rested my case.
Let me just bring a small correction in terms of the prayer line or counseling line. It is 011009553. 011009553. One question that has come from the viewers is, hello, I have a question for Dr. Njenga. What is the best way to help the mentally ill who heavily rely on meds and therapy? With this pandemic, one session has been suspended. I guess you get the gist.
I think I've got the gist. I mean, by the very nature of interactions such as this one can't say everything that they ought to say. I really ought to have said from the very beginning that when one is doing calculations on vulnerable groups of people, one of the most important vulnerable groups are people who pre-COVID-19 already had mental health needs, people who are attending to doctors, people who are getting medications, people who are already depressed, had schizophrenia, and so on and so forth. That is a very, very important, a very vulnerable group. And they're vulnerable at two levels. The first level of vulnerability is because all mental disorders, perhaps without exception, do not like stress, pressure, and so on. Secondly, virtually all of them don't like this social isolation that we are having, because they do best when people are supported and so on and so forth. So everything we're telling people now is in the direction of pushing people away in the direction of getting a mental illness. The second level is that it's making it difficult for people to access care, because the access that you have to your mental health specialist or any other, whether it's psychiatrist, psychologist, whatever it is limited to a large extent by just the limitation in physical movement. What has happened recently, and we're doing this ourselves now, is that we have now introduced telepsychiatry. There are activities that we are involved in where we are able to do. I've seen you, Provost, doing very effectively sermons from here.
Yes.
So the reality is that if you can do it, I can do it, and we're doing it. And we are taking appointments on Zoom and other media. And the way it happens, and I'm answering your question specifically, is that by being creative, a mental health specialist can actually carry out a proper examination and evaluation, can make a determination on the diagnosis, and can make a determination on whether one needs medication or not. In the event that one needs medication, it's possible to send a prescription direct either to the patient or to the pharmacy. You know what? This thing is teaching us so many new things. I mean, look at you sitting here and talking to your people on the Provost Diary. You hadn't thought about this one.
No.
This is new. So in very specific answer to that question, yes, vulnerable people who have had mental illnesses, but solutions are there and they are available. So just consult your mental health provider and they will give you a solution.
Dr. As we conclude on the first part, what we are saying here, in the new normal, we can remain mentally healthy. What are those simple steps that people can take to remain healthy mentally?
I don't think there are simple things that one can do, but there are things people can do. I think given the challenge that we have before us today, the first thing is the acknowledgement of the abnormality of the times that we now find ourselves. We are the ones who are normal, the virus is abnormal. The second thing is the recognition that we are not powerless. There are things that that government has told us that we should do and ought to do. There are things that we all know that that will keep us ourselves safe. And I think always we should listen to our government, but on this one, I think we should listen to our government, and that gives us a sense of empowerment. Nancy talked earlier about not treating this period like holiday season. This is not a holiday season. We are not on holiday. Holiday will come another day, but not today. And I think structuring our days and making sure that physically and mentally we are well. Routine is good. Routine is important. It promotes good sleep hygiene. There are things you can do about sleep promotion that would help you. But finally, I think in two ways, what I'm about to say is true. This thing will come to an end. Even if I remember, when he trained for a long time and Noah's Ark was there, that train came to an end and it got finished and life continued and so on. So this thing will come to an end. And finally, the things that we have said about resilience and promotion, and in particular, and in a program such as this one, investment in social capital, that includes connection with your church, with your family, with your neighborhood, and so on. As long as we know we are not helpless in this, we will go over it and it will come to an end and we shall overcome, and there is a bright future for all of us. That I know.
It has been our pleasure to host Dr. Frank Njenga in this Provost Desk Live show. Dr. Frank will be leaving us for another assignment, and I will continue in the second session with Dr. Nancy Njenga. Dr. It has been our utmost pleasure to host you here, and you said profound things, and we must say, God bless you, keep healthy, and keep yourself safe. We need you in days to come.
Thank you.
God bless you. We take a break now. The Provost Desk Live. Today we are discussing on the topic of adjusting to the new normal. In the first session we had Dr. Frank Njenga speaking to us on matters of mental health, and he has connected very well with what we were speaking last Sunday and what we are just about to do with Dr. Njenga. And let me emphasize on one point, Dr. Njenga, that has come from Dr. Frank on connectedness.
Yes.
That people who come out of pandemics better are people who have social connection, the social capital. And one member here is asking, Wamboi Mwaura, is asking, what should we do to take care of our mental health as we are isolated in the house? People have a lot of stress and anxiety and getting irritable with each other. Although the social capital is important, although the family has come out as one of the best social support, it can also be a place of toxicity. How do families remain mentally healthy?
Thank you, Provost, and I like what we've been taken through by Daktari. And I need to say that social capital really is not just about mental health. There's a major research that has been done by a psychologist. I think this is Martin Seligman. And he highlights the 10 things that are most fulfilling for man and are very significant. And you'll be surprised, the number one is relationships. And he talks about each one of us having like 5 significant relationships where you can have heart-to-heart relationship with someone. Not these ones of men going to watch football, talk politics. Someone you can empty your heart to, someone you can talk about your issues to. Just count 3 to 5. Then you're a rich man. You're a fulfilled man. You're a happy man. Now, when we bring it down to people who are having issues like mental health, I think we mentioned last time that isolation, withdrawing, is one of the symptoms we find with conditions of mental illness. Now, when they are even more isolated right now, that means their symptoms and their conditions are exacerbated or they are more magnified. So when we talk about social capital, we are talking about investing in relationships, in meaningful relationships. Not just going for a chama or a wedding for someone I don't know, or just meeting in church and we hug and wave and we don't know each other. Do I know your problems? Can we share? Can we pray together? Can we laugh together? Do I know you and your family? Not just that you have 3 children, but a little bit more deeply that if I have an issue, I can reach out to you. And allow me to say that in our system, because of our culture and how people were raised, there is the issue of people not wanting to share their problems with their neighbors because they will laugh at them. And that is why sometimes we open up the space of therapy, because that's a neutral space where you can open up and talk about your issues without feeling like a neighbor, a prayer partner will shout out that during a meeting. Let us pray for so and so, because it happens in the church. But in how people can manage the issues that they are going through, I think we also mentioned last time that the people who are affected more by this social isolation are people who are already having relationship issues that they went unresolved for a long, long time. They were not talking. They were not resolving issues, but COVID-19 is that blanket that has come to, to remove all these issues and leave them naked, because now we have to face one another. We were coping by going to work. We were running away from each other by going to chamas and going to other things and going to our businesses, come home late, leave home early. Now we don't have that. The issue is at this time, and I think this question was asked in another media house I was talking to, that people need to pack some issues. Let's assume this is a war we are fighting. If there is fire in the house right now, if we assume COVID-19 is a fire that is already in your house, we don't start saying, now you talk to me or you don't talk to me. We hold hands and take our children out and we all run. If we can view this COVID-19 issue as an issue that we need to come together as families and resolve, there are certain things we can sit down and say, today we are talking about food and whether we have food to eat and be able to sleep. As Christians, because we say we are 80% Christians in this country, how about being able to forgive and let go some of the issues so that we can bear with one another? And we can be able to live in harmony together at this time and be able to take probably our burdens to God or even share with somebody else. We may not meet with other people face to face or go out to our friends whom we share with. But we can do WhatsApp video. WhatsApp is free. We can call each other. We can talk for 1 hour. We can call our provost and our pastors. We can call our leaders. We can call counselors, the ones we know. I am doing a lot of telecounseling right now. I think I'm more busier in the house than I am in my office. So it's more about being able to reach out. Right now, talk to someone as opposed to keeping quiet. And if we know people who are going through mental issues or health challenges, we need to reach out and talk to them. We are requesting even counselors and therapists. This is a time to reach out to our clients and find out how they are coping, because we need it. And because we can't meet physically, we can meet on Facebook, we can meet on Skype, we can meet on Zoom, we can meet on WhatsApp video. Let's keep that going. And a call to find out. We can even pray together through all these media, whatever, platforms. We can worship together through these media platforms. So the only thing we are not having is meeting physically. But we can keep that social connectivity going on. Yes.
A family is locked in a house.
Yes.
They are working in their house. I think it's important to help people know that although they are one, they are individuals.
Yes.
Because sometimes we confuse oneness with my space.
Yes.
And people should be able to have boundaries even within the home,
Yes.
that we can share that space together. We can also speak. We can also talk to one another and agree. How do we help each other to have their freedom, but also at the same time share the space?
I like that very much, especially coming from the provost.
Okay.
Because when you're marrying people there at the church, you're the one who tells them you have become one.
Yes.
So when they come to us in therapy and we tell them they are not one,
Yes.
they are like, we got married in the church.
Yes, and they
And
say
we became one.
Yes.
One, we attract opposite of our personality.
Yes.
And because of that, there's introverted and extroverted. This one who talks a lot, this one who doesn't talk, and they feel like they are connecting so well. And when they get home and in the first few years, they are so happy. But with time, as challenges start trickling in, the same personality that we enjoyed, person who used to talk nicely, entertain you, that becomes noise.
Yeah.
Now you're making noise. Now you're disturbing me. So now we start looking at how different we are from one another, as opposed to celebrating the diversity that brought us together.
Sure.
So when we are not one, when we take that we are not one, we have different aspirations, different dreams, different needs, emotions. Some will want to watch different programs on TV. We need to have different ways of taking care of ourselves. And for us, we tell people, fill yourself with goodness and happiness, and then be able to come out and share with your partner and your family members.
Sure.
If your way of taking care of yourself is isolating and reading a book, create that corner in your house and tell people, for this 1 hour,
I'll be
no
alone.
disturbance. The person who you are telling may not be enjoying books. They may want to cook or clean or just sit and idle about. That the rest is their way, or even napping. That is their way of rejuvenating themselves. So let us be aware. Discover what makes us tick. Discover what restores us, so that we can easily be going into it, and then we come when our cups are full and we have something to share. Our wellness, our happiness is our responsibility, not our partner's responsibility.
Sure.
Yes.
Last night, my firstborn daughter has been watching a series, a movie which has episodes. It's very interesting, and my wife has been consumed into it, and all of us.
Yes.
But my small daughter wanted to watch a particular program. Then my daughter quickly said, you'll watch alone that one. And she complained and said, when I suggest, you say I will watch alone. When you want yours, we watch all of us.
Yes.
So I've come to discover that space is for all of us. And quickly I said, after this one, we'll watch Kizzy's one, so that we share a space. We are all very different, different interests, but we are one family. So there's unity, but also there is diversity in the family. A few areas that I would like us now to dive deeper in connection with last Sunday. And the first area is the area of anxiety and anticipatory loss. I know you mentioned that, but could you dive deeper? Because surely people had businesses. They had plans for the year. This year, many people call this year double-double, expecting double blessings because it's 2020. Now, the sense of loss
Is real.
and the anticipatory loss is real. And Dr. Njenga said, COVID-19 may be with us for some time. And he wasn't saying, he wasn't painting gloom, but he was saying here, it's a reality.
It's a reality, yes. Yes, indeed, and having looked at healthy and unhealthy anxiety, and besides anxiety, there's stress. There are people who are angry. You took a loan, you started your business, and now you either have to talk to your bank to hold the premiums that you're supposed to be paying. So there is a lot that's going on with everyone. But we talked about the self-care, how to cope. And I think I'll combine it with the first question of the mental health challenges people are facing at home. How do we deal with anxiety? Because it is a mental health issue. How do we deal with stress? And all these things people are anticipating. One, we said we need to accept the situation. We cannot fight it. I like what Dr. said, that the enemy is the COVID-19. It's the virus. We cannot be enemy to ourselves. And this is how we need to stop being enemies to ourselves.
We stop looking at ourselves as victims.
As victims and being helpless in this situation, because we've been told what to do. Social distancing, isolate yourself, sanitize and wear masks. Then we also said last week, and I think we built on it a little today, the exercising, having a structure, being able to do all these things and pursuing hobbies. But today we are building on a very important factor. The messages and the pictures people are creating in their minds. Because problems are not what they are. It is how we see them. For example, there is someone who is sitting and thinking, I will not wake up from this. So what happens when you entertain such a thought process, which in psychology we call catastrophizing, seeing the worst happening? You have invalidated that there are people who have actually contracted COVID-19 and gotten better. Your mind is also using a mental filter where it is not seeing the positives that are happening. You're only picking out the negatives. Because, I mean, from the numbers we are being given, more people are getting better and getting healed, and there are very few who are dying, even in our own country. We are now almost at 300, but how many losses do we have?
14.
Only 14 people have died. So it doesn't mean, if you think that even though if the worst happened and you contracted the condition, it doesn't mean you're going to die. So for someone who is creating an image and a picture and having a message of this is the worst thing that's going to happen, I may not get out of this. That's a cognitive process or a thought process that may make things worse for them. So what sort of images and pictures are we creating in our minds? And we need to know them. And I want to give a very simple method that you can do that. Our emotions are driven by our thoughts. And our emotions drive behavior. So when you have a negative thought, you have a negative emotion. Meaning you have a negative behavior. And the opposite is true. When you have a positive thought, you have a positive emotion and you have positive behavior. Very quickly, look at an issue where someone's business is, they've closed the business. What are they telling themselves? What images are they creating in their head? I'm going to be poor. I'm going to be auctioned. I will not arise from this. What emotion is likely to being evoked by that thought process? Helplessness, pain, anger, and even wanting to even end their life because they are feeling like they have lost. So what behavior will drive this person? What behavior or action will they have? It may be something to do with wanting to avoid the business world completely and even not want to be associated with the business. So they're not having any solutions they can think about. Take the same person, but with a different thinking process.
Sure.
The business is going down. This thing, I don't know how long it's going to go on. So they can have a thought process of like, I need to rethink. What else can I do? So they're not helpless. They're thinking of what else can I do? So the emotion is not necessarily a happy one, but they have an emotion that keeps them proactive.
Gives them hope.
Gives them hope. What will they do next? They will not stay helpless. They will call out someone. By the way, I have this idea that I've been thinking about. And I want to structure it properly. I want to see how it can work. So at the end of this season, because this is really not a storm, we are like in a season, because we don't know how long it's going to be, then they will be able to come out better and be able to do something. So our thoughts, if you find you have negative thoughts, please be realistic. Check with reality. Question your thoughts. Why am I thinking this way? How come I'm not seeing there are people who are getting better? How come I'm only thinking of the worst happening? How come I'm thinking this thing has come to finish us or to finish my family? Because there are many families that have gotten it and they have come out better. Yes.
Our listeners, we remind you that you can get in touch with us through social media on Facebook, and on Twitter, and your questions or comments will be passed to me so that we can be able to address it. Continue engaging with us. Kindly ask your questions and we will address them. If you need prayer or counseling, our designated line for that is 011009553. 011009553. Dr. Ari, let's even get deeper, but what you're saying is very, very important for people to know that if you're occupied by negativity, the problem will look very big, and in the process, even in terms of behavior and action, it will be negative. There are people who will experience real loss. Dr. Njenga did allude to that when he said that COVID-19 may push people into hunger and into poverty. And that can cause a lot of anxiety. Especially as Christians, we don't like acknowledging that fact. I think we are taught that what you confess is what you get. And so we tend not to want to acknowledge that. Could you bring in the whole issue of loss, acknowledging that, replanning our budgets, our meals, adjusting to a normal that was not normal?
And it's good that you also bring out the issue of the church, because this is the time also to preach more faith than fear. Because people are really fearing what will happen next. But also faith that is based on the word, not faith that is based on fake miracles. And I'm glad that all those pastors have gone into hiding, that they are no longer there. The ones of anointed oil to heal COVID. Nobody has come out to heal COVID.
The miracle workers.
The miracle workers. So we now know that some of these things are fake. So
No real pastors.
now we know the real pastors, yes. So if we as a church can teach faith more, and so that people are also not going to be overwhelmed by the fear, because fear makes you avoid to do things. Fear makes you feel helpless and not able to see any solution and feel stuck in your state. And yes, the next thing we will need to do is accept the situation. This is what is happening. I may not be able to go back to this business, but as we are at home and we have time to think through, what else can I do? Who can I talk to? Today I have food for my children and for my family, but 3 months down the line I may not have anything. What do I need to do? And I would be looking at people in the villages with farms, or even all of us here in Nairobi with farms. This is the time to think of how to do farming, to even provide food, even for free, to give out to people, or even to sell. So we still are not helpless, I would put it that way, because we only are helpless at the level of our thought processes, not because of lack of what we can hold with our hands. If our minds are proactive and we are seeing we can be able to do this, we can talk to this person, we have resources that we can seek out, then true enough, combined with our faith, we will be able to come up with something. The challenge is that many times we stay stuck because of the helplessness in our mind, not because of lack of resources. Because when we are proactive in our mind, we call it an empowered mind. We will keep thinking, what can I do next? Who do I need to talk to? And we'll be able to get there. But in the meantime, accept the situation, do not fight with it, but keep planning and hoping for the best. Yes.
Even as we hope, how do we acknowledge our limitations, our boundaries? You know about the serenity prayer.
Yes.
It's not a defeatist prayer.
Yes.
But it's a prayer that acknowledges that there are certain things that I have power to change,
Yes.
and there are certain things I don't have power to change. How do you balance those two things?
I think we could use the example of where we've seen people deciding not to lock down even worship and continue going to church and everything. And in the studies we've read, like this company in the US that was involved in making sausages and bacon and all that, and had the highest number of whatever, it became almost an epicenter for spread. When they got only one person, and they decided the economy was supposed to be sustained, and they continued with the factories remaining open until they got to about 600 infections. That is when they decided to close down the factory. So it's more of how do we also see that there are certain things we must do now and not fight. We can't fight with COVID.
Yeah.
We can't fight with it because it's something we know once we get it, some of us will get better, but we don't know how many numbers will be affected and end up dying. So because that's a war we cannot fight, and I like that you brought out the serenity prayer, being able to have the wisdom to know what you can fight and what you cannot. And because we cannot fight the virus, then we stay at home and isolate and start restructuring ourselves and rethinking the way to do and the way to work. Such that we are not only going to do things the usual way. And I would say the person who is able to adjust now is also going to be able to adjust after COVID season.
Sure.
The person who is not able to be able to adjust now, because who we are is what we take to everything else we go to. If you're not being able to adjust in the here and now, tomorrow we still will not be able to adjust. So let us use this space to learn how to be uprooted from our comfort zone and learn how to adjust to do things in different ways so that we will be better at the end of this season. Yes.
Human beings have capacity to adjust.
Yes.
And I think even Dr. Njenga
That's
did mention that,
yes.
even in matters social and health. And so and I think that's what both of you have said, is we are not helpless.
Yes.
We can be able to overcome. Human beings have the tendency to be resilient. But where people have the social support, it is even much, much better.
Exactly.
And that leads me to the next area of relationship. We cannot overemphasize the importance of relationships.
Yes.
And not just relationships that we have today, but relationships that we carry with us every day. But Kenyans today cannot be able to have the usual relationships they've had. We've seen, for somebody to move from here to Homa Bay in an empty coffin, in the name of going to mourn with their members, what are they looking for? They're looking for a relationship. They want to go home. I hear many people want to go from Thika, they want to cross over. And I can imagine any roadblock has many people wanting to leave. Could you mention something about this behavior of human beings wanting relationships, some that may not be here? You have students who may have been locked in the city.
Yes.
They can't go home. They are single. They may not have much supplies. And these are real matters of relationships. Because the relationship is not just a husband and wife and children. They are single mothers. They are single people. All that. It's quite comprehensive.
Yes, and I hear you, Provost. And what we are saying is that the social distancing and the social isolation is the lesser evil. The bigger evil is being out there and either contracting the condition or passing it on to others. We've been told there are people who are not showing any symptoms. But in the meantime, even as they interact with people, they are carriers. They are still passing it on to others. That is why we are going back to, it is human behavior, yes. But how do we learn to adjust? Because I know human beings don't like to change. It's uncomfortable, whether positive or negative. But this is a time where you look and get rational and logical about it. Which is the lesser evil? Am I better alive or am I better dead because I attended a burial? And really, even after attending the burial, it's a cultural issue. But if I contracted COVID-19 and I also passed it on to somebody else, what good has come out of that? Going back again to, I am stuck here for the students, I am stuck in my room. We have avenues that we can use to communicate. There is M-Pesa that we can use. There are people you could call and find out whether someone can M-Pesa you something to be able to buy some food and be able to sustain yourself. So I think for me, the key message here is the helplessness our people want to put themselves through, even when it is not actual helplessness, because it can be more created. Because I'm used to going to work and getting my own money, but now I don't have the money, but I need to eat. But we are not helpless. We are such a social, cultural society that we are all connected to a family here or there. If it's not my family in the village, it is my church. That I can reach out to my church and they'll provide for me something to eat. Let us exploit these avenues, as opposed to doing opposite of what we are being told by the government, because at the end of the day, we will go out and get the food, but we are likely then to end up dying and even causing others to die. Yes.
At the core of every human being is the whole question of being appreciated,
Yes.
and being loved and affirmed.
Yes.
And maybe this is something that we need to learn more now that families are locked together.
Yes.
But there's also the other side of it, which is communication. Either we don't know how to communicate with one another, because even when we want to express our emotions, positive emotions to people, Sometimes it comes out negatively. How do you help families to be able to communicate, learn to communicate better, avoid criticism, contempt, defensiveness, creating stone walls that are, how do you deal with area of communication?
And I like that you quote that. That's a research that has been done by a psychologist called John Gottman. And people can Google and find out. He worked with about 1,000 couples over a period of 10 years. And he realized that couples were separating because of just communication. Not financial issues, not intimacy issues. They would have those problems, but how they communicated about them made the difference. And being social beings, that the fuel that drives our lives, our marriages, our families, our children, how we talk to them is communication. Then that boils down to how we communicate. Now, they gave 4 predictors of divorce and separation, and those are the 4 negative communication styles. One of them is criticism, where someone just constantly keeps criticizing their partner or their children or the other person. And besides criticizing them, they can also get contemptuous, that they have a lot of contempt and almost hatred towards them. So they will call them names, they will use very negative names to identify them or to call them by those names. From contempt, the person who is being criticized and is experiencing the contempt, they probably will end up defending themselves a lot, justifying their actions. So that's another negative communication style, because you're not accepting your mistakes. So you're also going to defend yourself constantly. And the more you defend, the more the person who is critical criticizes you. At the end of the day, when the person who is trying to defend themselves realizes I'm not winning here, they stonewall or they withdraw. And they keep quiet. And I can tell you from my therapy work, because I work with family lawyers who are helping families with these issues, all the time when couples come in, there are those 4 communication styles you pick. And when someone is constantly being criticized, there's nothing good that will come from that. I would request families at this time, please be aware. If you're the person who just sees the negative in other people, ask yourself, how would I want to be treated? Because everybody has something positive about them. So if you're the one who criticizes, think of you being criticized, how it would feel, so that you would stop to do that. If you're the one who calls people negative names, think of how it would feel to be insulted, to be called stupid, to be called foolish. How would that feel? Because we say that the core of every human being is to be loved, appreciated and affirmed. This is something that we need to give to our children, to our partners, to those around us, to our friends, so that they can feel valued. And that is the 4, 3, 5 relationships I talked about, where people feel valued and accepted and appreciated for who they are, not what they have.
Imagine somebody today is in an abusive relationship.
Yes.
In the past, I have reflected on this matter and I have written in the Provost desk, it's available on Facebook, that God will not be honored for you to die in an abusive relationship in the name of until death do us part. And that is about maybe a couple. Maybe it's single people who are in abusive relationships. And at this context, it's becoming even worse. And in the name of until COVID-19, how do people deal with abusive relationship across the board?
You'll be surprised, and I like that that comes from you. And therefore, as a provost and reverend, you're telling people you do not advocate to there is no God says there is no divorce.
But I also don't advocate violence in home.
Yes, because that's the point we get all the time. Someone is being killed, but they come in and say, God says there is no divorce. And I ask, has he said there is murder? So that they don't answer. Now, I want to even surprise you more. This violence is not in marriages. I teach at the university. Our students who are in the hostels, boys, let me call them boys and girls, 23, 20, 25, who are in the hostels and they have chosen to be partners. They are fighting. They are almost killing one another. And I remember teaching an undergraduate class one time and asking them, when did you get a right to be a husband? Who gave you a right to be a wife? You are a student.
Sure.
How would you say that you allow this person to beat you and you cannot be talking to other students in the school because you belong to them? It's a societal issue. It's a cultural issue where children have grown up observing violence. Boys have had role models who have taught them how men behave. Girls have seen role models in their mothers who vumilia and zip up. So when they get into marriages and to the relationships, and even when they go back to their mothers, they tell them, mwanamke ni kufanya nini?
Kunyamaza.
Ni kunyamaza. So what are these educated, liberated women doing? The same. So there is something as a church, and the church needs to come out strongly about this, to tell people we need to have a voice. And I think I needed to give that number. I'll post it back to you. There is a number that people need to call if they are experiencing any violence in their homes, because it is not right. It is not right at all. And the person experiencing it needs to know that your wellness is your responsibility, not your partner's responsibility. Please take care of yourself, and safety comes first. Then we can talk about the marriage. Because if there is no safety and you're being killed, you will still not have a marriage and a family. So let us prioritize and keep yourself safe. Then we can talk and resolve the issues that are making you fight. Yes.
What we are saying here is, if you're experiencing any form of violence, it is not godly. You will not go to heaven because you died in a relationship.
Yes.
And I think that one I have said in the pulpits of the cathedral, and I don't advocate for divorce.
Yes.
But surely relationships should add value.
Yes.
But you realize many relationships don't add value at all.
Yes.
And you'd rather be alone than being in a relationship that is actually killing you. And so there is need for a theological balance between what do we forgive and what do we address. And during this time of the coronavirus, it is important that you don't just keep quiet in your home in the name of being a loyal husband or loyal wife, or being in a bad relationship as a young person. It is wrong. Let us address this. Dr. Nancy, what kind of people are calling you for help?
I would say,
how do you categorize them?
how would I categorize them? One is the clients have been handling. We were able to continue on Skype and Zoom. I've also had taken in a number of new clients, people who are working at home and having to balance teleworking and children. They have young children where kids are not understanding, mommy, daddy is home, how come you're not with me? And it's funny, even sometimes when they're doing the sessions, you hear the babies crying and coming to knock on the door. And one of the rules we come up with is that let them know mommy is working this 1 hour, and then need to be out there doing something else. So some of the issues are really anxiety, depression, but I want to say that it is not mainly because of this COVID-19. My take is with all the people, no. What COVID-19 has come to do is that you've been having all these issues, you've been piling them and been coping with too much work, social interactions, busy at church, busy at work, busy in chamas. So you've never had time to listen to yourself. Now you have time to sit by yourself. You're not going to the gym, you're not going to the chamas, you're not meeting your friends, you're not going to work. So because you have this time by yourself, everything now comes up. It's like it's just boiling from inside. And now you have no one to talk to or nowhere to go. So sometimes people get overwhelmed with things they've been packing and coping by doing and not resolving them. So it's not necessarily because of the anxiety and the stress from being at home. It's because of the issues we've lived with for a very long time. And for me, it's a key message to everyone. Let us take care of our psychological, emotional well-being, the way we do our physical bodies and our spirituality.
Let's
That is
also
exactly by
take care of-
connecting, by talking, by getting out to journal the things that pain us. Look out for help from people who can help you and listen to the things that probably you've lived with, even from childhood. For some people, it's even childhood issues, and you've never dealt with them. But now at home, when you're in bed and you are not really tired, when you wake up at night, these are the dreams Dr. Njenga talked about, that you start seeing those things and re-experiencing the pain of the things you've gone through.
I'm bringing this to an end in a minute, but there are a few questions that have come from the people, and let me spend the next 5 minutes to deal with their question. Enid Nsinza Ngugi says that some say the reason why Kenyans are not listening to the government directive is due to the fact that Kenyans are used to being duped by the government. What do you advise people who believe this is just another way of government to get money? I'm going to leave that to the end comment, where you'll be able to comment together on how should we wear our masks correctly. But the other question that is coming from somebody by the name Lekery Brown, please ask Dr. Nancy to expound on the issue of self-space and the need for partners to understand each other's space, and also more on personality differences. Wamboi Mwaura says, how do we deal with stigma caused by the disease? We are seeing people who have contracted the disease or have been healed from it facing a lot of stigma. Then Prince Peter Hart, how do we prioritize self-care and taking a break from parenting duties to lessen the risk of lashing out on children?
Many questions. Let me start with the ones I remember.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yes, personality differences. I said that is what attracted you to your partner, because you are different. So the same things that you celebrated then, please go. They haven't gone anywhere. They are still there. Go back to them. What made you like this person? Because now you're looking out at the negatives. Because when we have opposite of personality, my strengths are my husband's weaknesses. His strengths are my weaknesses. Now, when we are together, I can choose to focus on his strengths or on his weaknesses. So what do you choose to focus on so that you can build a positive space where you are? When we talk about space in the family, we said there are things you enjoy doing. Have your me time. Let your family also have their me time. The children the same. Then have time to come together. Share a meal together or play a game together like Scrabble or Snakes and Ladders, whatever you may choose to do. Or even just skip rope together. Or even watch a movie together. Or even cook together. There are so many things that we can structure that we can do together. And we can have a rota where today we will cook your meal. If you enjoy ugali, it's your day-to-day. Somebody else likes githeri, that's what we're going to cook today for them, and the whole family enjoys. So this is a time not to be selfish. This is a time to compromise. This is a time to show commitment. This is a time to show a bit of selflessness, even when we are exiting a little bit to take care of ourselves. Yes.
I'm going to ask you in a minute to conclude with talking about the government regulations and the way Kenyans look at the government and also the wearing of the mask correctly.
I will say this to the person who has talked about the government being fake. If COVID-19 is only in Kenya, then we would say that our government is being fake.
Very good reasoning.
So we've seen what's happening in other countries. We've seen what happened to Italy and US for not locking down faster than they should have. And now they paid seriously for that. So there are certain things we can see this is global. So this is not about our government. It is what is happening in all the countries, even the richest. So let's obey what the government is saying.
Your mask has covered the nose and the mouth.
Yes.
Is that the way to wear a mask?
Yes, there is. For the mask, I think the basic understanding I have seen is that every mask has something like a wire at the top on one side. So that's the wire that we are supposed to fix so that it can curve with our
Above
nose.
the nose, yeah.
With the nose, and then now we pull this down to below the chin. Some people are wearing this wire here, down here. So the issue is to ensure that the wire is at the top, and then the layers. There's a way, if you wear inside out, the layer will not help you to breathe better. So check out which layer should be on the inside and which one should be on the outside.
Thank you.
And that information is all the time in the media. So let's get this information. Yes.
As you give your parting shot,
Yes.
people are asking, how do we get in touch with Dr. Nancy and then wrap up what we've covered today?
Okay. If you're looking to do Skype, my Skype ID is nancy.nyaga5. Just send an invite, and I'll guide you and send a consent form for you to be able to fill, and we can start off the process of doing therapy. If you want to book an appointment, you could call at the number 0705 671 777. That can be sent on the platform, so that you can call and then book an appointment. 0705 671 777.
Thank you.
Just to call and book, because that will be picked by my assistant, because I'm not able to pick the calls all the time. And then we can plan how to do it. And then we also vet the pro bono cases, how we can be able to help those who are not even able to pay. So we are able to do that as well. People can come up as a group. If you have a chama group or a prayer group, we can have a group of 10 people or even 20 and do a Zoom session where we can be able to array all the fears people are going through at this time, yes.
There are many, many feedbacks that we have gotten from the people. Some of them we may not be able to read, but they help us with the conclusion of today's session. Number one is the whole issue about the social connectedness.
Yes.
It makes us resilient, and we become better when we have social capital, the support that we have. And I can see Mrs. Lucy Waroinge saying, thank you very much. This is great to note that social connectedness and social capital will help us all to cope better. This is a great asset that we have as Africans, as Kenyans, because we are socially connected. Then Pauline Wawera Gikanga says that boundaries with the families, this is good that we share the same space, but we are able to be individuals, unity in diversity. We have talked about issues of being in abusive relationships, whether they are married or extramarital affairs, or young people relating. It is wrong. Families should not be in such relationships. We've emphasized about ability to communicate and communicate well, and it is not fair that people can use abusive languages whenever they share some space together. The cathedral is still open to counseling and prayer. Send your prayers or call our counseling and prayer line. That is 0110 095 533. 0110 095 533. It has been our pleasure to host you today. Thank you very much for the many feedback that we are getting through our social media, and we will continue to serve you here at All Saints Cathedral. Next Wednesday at 9 a.m. we will meet at the same place, and I'll be having the Reverend Canon, Professor Joseph Galgalo, speaking on the whole area of the theology of pandemics, theology, the whole question of how can a good God allow us to suffer. So Professor Galgalo, who is the Vice Chancellor of the University, St. Paul's University, will be able to help us in interacting with matters of theology. And kindly send your questions early. We'll be able to prepare, send it to him so that he can weave all your questions to the discussions on Wednesday. We look forward to hosting you again. Dr. Nancy, again, a big, big thank you from the feedback we've gotten. And thank you for the 2 Wednesdays that you have been with us.
Thank
Let
you.
us pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you again that we have spent time here to address issues that affect your people. We pray for each and every individual and families and whatever they could be going through. For those that are sick, we pray for your intervention. For those who are depressed and in stressful situations, you are God who provides. May you answer the prayers of your people. This is our prayer in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you. God bless you.
Amen.